Hello and welcome to Did You Know Gaming Extra. For this episode, we've collected trivia from a variety of Game Boy and Game Boy Color titles. While Nintendo took over the TV in many homes, the company had yet to dominate gaming on the go. With the release of the Game Boy, that all changed. Nintendo led the market with a relatively modest machine in comparison to competitors like the Game Gear or Atari Lynx. As is a common trend with Nintendo, the design of the handheld didn't rely on power alone, with many praising the system for its long battery life and rugged build quality. The Game Boy paved the way for many series that are still staples in the industry, and continue to see sequels to this day. One of the best-selling titles for the system was Tetris, though this is likely contributed by the fact that many Game Boys were bundled with the puzzle game. The game was so popular that even Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak was an avid player. His passion and skill with the game was particularly noteworthy, as he'd regularly send in his scores multiple times to Nintendo's official magazine, Nintendo Power. His scores often reached the top of the scoreboards. However, Nintendo Power eventually stopped publishing his name in the magazine because of his constant dominance. This didn't deter the entrepreneur, who managed to get around his shadow ban from the charts by submitting his scores under another alias, Yvette's Kainzao. This name would be approved and put onto these score tables, despite the fact that it's a thinly veiled disguise, simply being Steve Wozniak spelled backwards. Another powerhouse of the Game Boy was undoubtedly the Pokémon franchise. It's fairly common knowledge that the original Pokémon games had many errors, but this seems to stem to the game's box as well. The blurb on the back of the boxes states that the player can catch 139 different Pokémon without trading. However, a player can only obtain 124 Pokémon in a single playthrough without trading. This is because the 139 number includes Pokémon that the player could attain, but has to choose between. It doesn't take into account that players must choose between the Omanyte and Kabuto families, the Evolutions, Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan, and the 3 starting Pokémon lines. It also doesn't take into account the 4 Pokémon that only evolve when traded. As a side note, we also found that this line stating that 139 Pokémon can be obtained in the game is incorrect on early versions of the back of the Pokémon Blue box, which seems to be a copy-paste of the blurb from Pokémon Red. This mistake was fixed in later revisions. 2 more franchises that made a stand on the Game Boy are the Mario Land and Kirby series. These 2 platforming giants did so well on the handheld that they were used to educate children. The Japan-only VHS tape, titled Mario Kirby Meisaku, which means Mario Kirby Masterpiece in English, was an animated short made to teach Japanese children various kanji symbols. It didn't feature much animation, however, and was mostly still images accompanied with Japanese text. The short was split into 2 stories, one loosely based on Super Mario Land 2 featuring Bunny Mario, Wario, and Peach, and another based on Kirby returning a lost puppy to its mother. The video is narrated and voice acted by MAYUMI Tanaka. This in particular is noteworthy, as this is the first time Kirby was ever given a voice. Speaking of Kirby, there's some interesting trivia within Kirby's Pinball Land. By default, the game's high scores are held by Zephyra, Fisali, Dendrob, and Gerbera. These names are actually a reference to characters from Mobile Suit Gundam 0083. The names are short for GP01 Zephyranthes, GP02 Physalis, GP03 Dendrobium, and Gerbera Tetra. Another fact about Kirby's Pinball Land is that its game engine was likely used for Pokémon Pinball. This is based on the similar gameplay of the 2 games, and the fact that HAL Laboratory are credited in Pokémon Pinball, even though the game was developed by Jupiter Corporation. A fair amount of games on the handheld contain hidden messages and content. Within the data of Spider-Man 2: The Sinister Six, a hidden message can be found which references several of the game's developers: Grant Davies, Michael Smith, Peter Suwara, Paul Clark, and Ivan Kenny Sumiga. The message reads, Grant was last seen fleeing Taurus Games with a briefcase packed full of money under each arm. He remains wanted in 4 states. Smitty made several unsuccessful attempts to circumnavigate the world in a lunchbox. He now lives in Peru. Peter Stinky Suwara devoted his life to the quest of spiritual enlightenment. He has lived in recluse since Spider-Man. Paul submitted several game designs to Activision, all featuring a snowboard and a railgun. None were accepted. Ivan was arrested after a hosting series of wild parties with crazy antics. He is currently serving 32 life sentences in a state penitentiary. In Sabrina, the animated series, Zapped, hidden messages actually change depending on which regional version of the game is being explored. In the US version, there are 3 instances of the same message reading, "Hello there." But in the EU version, it seems the developers were aware that people would look at their game data, so included a little joke. The 3 messages includes a single instance of "Hello there," as well as "Wow, Salem, so this is what the inside of a hex editor looks like," and "Hey look, someone ripped our game." Strangely, another piece of code is a reference to a file path for one of the developer's computers, or more specifically, a reference to their Zone Alarm antivirus settings. The Game Boy Color game Looney Tunes Collector Alert has its own hidden image too, which is only accessible through a cheat device. To see it, the player must use the Game Genie code 8A170AF74, then hit reset. This time the message is in French, and shows a young child with the words "From the team at Martian Alert," with Bugs Bunny saying, "Hi Jeremiah," likely included by a developer as a hidden message to their son. Next on the list, we're talking about SpongeBob SquarePants' Legend of the Lost Spatula, which was the first dedicated SpongeBob game. Not only does the game have a hidden level select menu, it also has at least one unused area. There's a room to the right of the outer town map that can be accessed by hacking the game. The room in question appears to be a version of SpongeBob's living room that resembles the Season 1 episode Jellyfish Jam. While not actually hidden away, CONKER'S Pocket Tales code is peculiar compared to most Game Boy games. The cartridge itself contains 2 separately programmed games, with one running when inserted into a standard Game Boy and another when inserted into a Game Boy Color. While both games have the same story, some of the title's gameplay mechanics actually differ, as well as the game's maps. This Game Boy title was actually created to precede a Conker game on the Nintendo 64 called Conker's Quest, which was later renamed 12 Tales Conker 64, and then completely reworked into Conker's Bad Fur Day. As a result of these early plans changing, Pocket Tales has absolutely no connection to Conker's N64 misadventure at all. Another game which was almost forced to change direction by publishers was Shantae. Shantae's co-creator, Matt Bozen, has said that during development of the title, publishers had a hard time accepting the developer's choice of a female lead character. Bozen stated, "The most common reaction to Shantae back in the 90s was, 'Hey, great looking game, but who do the guys play as?' Like we must have messed up and put the Player 2 character in the Player 1 spot. It felt like our work was being dismissed for no good reason, and it made no sense to me. But eventually I came to understand that these people genuinely knew their markets, and that the game would probably not sell, and that was even more irritating. So I feel like Shantae had to exist, even if it was just to reach out and see if there was an audience reaching back." The game would ultimately see its release in 2002, extremely late into the handheld's lifecycle, being published by Capcom. And now it's time for this episode's random piece of trivia, so we're looking at 2013's Aliens Colonial Marines. Even considering all of the hype during the run-up to the game's release, and how the final product didn't live up to the claims of project lead Randy Pitchford, Colonial Marines was more shocking than just its massive visual downgrades. The game is well known for its awful enemy AI, and how aliens behave completely irrationally and out of character. However, this wasn't how the game was programmed to ship. At some point during development, a member of staff made a very simple mistake which resulted in the broken enemies. In one of the game's .ini files, which the game reads to determine a variety of settings, the word tether was spelt incorrectly, being written teether instead. This setting refers to where an enemy spawns into the game and is tethered, determining how they would move around a specific area of a level, making use of their environment more effectively. This means it's possible to actually fix this issue by simply using a text editor, making enemies behave as they had intended originally for final release. This doesn't, however, fix the other glaring issues with the game, and isn't actually really worth doing anyway. This mistake was ultimately discovered by James Dixon 963 from ModDB. I hope that you enjoyed the episode. Our patrons are obviously a very important part of this, and huge respect to them. We'd really appreciate if some of you guys would go down, leave a comment, and say something nice, you know? I think at the moment there's a lot of negativity going around. Understand it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Just, you know, we just want to make video game trivia videos and have some fun. So let's have some fun and spread some love. All the love to you, even if it's not sent back. Just know we really respect you watching and appreciate it.